You're on the Bible Forum. I'm Warren Sprouse. We're here every Sunday night from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern. Of course, we weren't here this past Sunday night. We had technical problems, as it turned out, and many, sadly, hours of trying to figure out what went wrong. It was me. I had clicked something I shouldn't have clicked, and it's just one of those things. We're in the process of getting a new website and some other things going on, and new studio arrangement and all the rest of it. So hopefully we'll get it all worked out. We've got some things that happened in the news this week that I think you should be aware of. We've got a note from Joni Eareckson, Tada. She's been diagnosed with COVID-19. She thanks all those who are praying for her husband Ken, following this diagnosis. She reads the comments from friends, and she says, "I am deeply humbled that the Holy Spirit has garnered so much prayer support for us. I don't deserve it, but I sure do appreciate it." We also have location tracking apps in the news. You know about this. It has to do with the COVID issue. Spyware. Spyware to enforce quarantine. Immunity passports. Throughout this year, 2020, governments around the world have deployed invasive surveillance technologies to contain the COVID-19 outbreak. Justifiable, no doubt, but they also invade our privacy. They chill our free speech. Contact tracing is a common public health response to contagious disease. In its traditional form, officials would phone call or interview in other ways people who were infected with whatever to find out who they'd had contact with. And then they would go and interview those people, and they kind of work through that process. But a lot of people have tried to automate the process with new technologies, and they have developed an app, as if an app is something that's going to save us. It's called Bluetooth signal strength, and it can be measured, but it doesn't take into consideration that the two people talking might be separated by a wall. They don't even know the other person is there. The technology is not perfect. But the app can fill the as yet unmet need for traditional public health measures such as testing and contact tracing and support for patients, PPE for health workers, social distancing, and wearing a mask. And in all of this, we find something called Apple Exposure Notice. It's Google's Apple Exposure Notice. They're calling it the GAEN. It apparently collects ephemeral random identifiers that are harder to correlate to particular individuals. Apparently that's a little safer. Also, this thing stores identifiers in your phone, unless the user, you, tests positive, in which case they can upload those identifiers to a publicly accessible database. Public health authorities in many of our states and even in foreign countries sponsor this GAEN compliant app. Participation has to be voluntary, but we will soon have laws that will change all that. Currently, the laws prohibit schools, workplaces, and restaurants from discriminating against people who do not use the proximity tracking. Watch for that to change. Some countries have used surveillance technologies to enforce home quarantine. These include compulsion to wear GPS-linked shackles. These downloaded government spyware technologies peep into your personal life through your phone and send government selfies with time and place stamps so that they know who you are, where you are, what you look like. And then there's the immunity passports. These would screen people for entry to public places. You don't have one, you don't get in the bank, or you don't get in the restaurant. The premise is that a person's not fit to enter a school, a workplace, a restaurant, unless they can prove they have tested negative for infection or supposedly obtained immunity through past infection. Can you see how all of this is coming together to keep track of every single person, at least has a phone, and find out who you are, where you live, what your health condition is, all the rest of it? It's a little, not a leap, a little short jump to monitoring your religious behavior, your political philosophies, and so forth. The systems may require a person to use their phone to display a digital credential at a particular doorway. You don't have the credential, you don't get in. The systems would be a significant step, they say, towards a national digital identification system. A system that can be used to collect and store your personal information, track your individual movements. And inevitable system errors would needlessly block people from going to school or work. Not going to happen? It already does. Do you know what this last election was about? You think you do. Outlined in a recent human rights campaign manifesto entitled Blueprint for Positive Change, the plan, as they call it, urges the incoming Biden administration to mandate compliance with their political agenda by stripping accreditation from religious colleges and universities that aren't meeting the non-discrimination policies and the science-based curricula standards regarding sexual orientation and gender identity. All that means is that the curriculum would reflect the existence of the God of the Bible, and because of that, it would be discarded. It would be banned from our higher education institutions and from our public schools at some point. The objective, which is one of 85 policy recommendations submitted by this LGBTQ advocacy group, demands that the Department of Education amend language found in the Higher Education Opportunity Act that presently requires accrediting agencies to, quote, respect a school's stated mission. The Department of Human Rights campaign argues, quote, should issue a regulation clarifying that this provision does not require the accreditation of religious institutions that have not met the so-called neutral accreditation standards, including non-discrimination policies and scientific curriculum requirements. They're talking about evolution here. Should the plan be carried out, it would effectively dissolve religious higher education institutions in America, as many employers do not hire applicants without a degree from an accredited school. JudicialWatch.org is talking to us this week, sharing with us about elected officials in major U.S. cities that plan to pass a law that will allow thieves to sell items they steal if they don't earn enough money for their basic needs. They know who these people are. They know that they have stolen your property. They will now allow them to sell your stolen property to take care of their basic needs. And trespassers to set up camp on private property when it is necessary to obtain adequate shelter, maybe in your garage. Apparently, dozens of other crimes, including assault and harassment, will be excused if suspects are poor, mentally ill, or addicted to drugs. Let's define mentally ill, shall we? They haven't yet. It's being crafted as a poverty defense and will allow municipal court judges to dismiss a multitude of crimes if poverty, mental illness, or a substance abuse disorder drove the perpetrator to commit the crime. There's an excuse for everything. Oh, and a new report released by the Alma Research and Education Center has exposed details about suspected efforts by the Iranian-led Shiite Axis to build civilian support networks throughout South Syria. Syria is just north of Israel. The report highlighted the strategic thinking being pursued by Iran, which views a civilian infrastructure as a foundation for building a military attack infrastructure against Israel. The effort received a green light by a key figure who visited the area in 2018. He is Abu al-Fadi al-Tabatabai. He's a personal advisor to the Iran supreme leader, Ali Khamenei. The Iranian-led Shiite axis sees southern Syria as a strategic area of paramount importance, aimed at achieving the goal of exporting the Islamic Revolution in terms of its civilian establishment. Achieving this particular objective will be an essential supportive instrument towards the advanced effort of forming a military foundation, enabling the creation of a direct Iranian front against Israel from southern Syria. The AmericanThinker.com published an article by Andrea Whitberg this past week. In the latest issue of the NEMJ, 2 doctors and a lawyer have written that it's time to do away with putting a newborn baby's biological gender, as demonstrated by its external genitalia, on the birth certificates. The article is behind a paywall, but the summary is there for all to see. Sex designations on birth certificates offer no clinical utility, and they can be harmful for intersex and transgender people, is the logic. Now keep in mind there are no studies supporting this transgender theory. No scientific studies. It's purely a psychological issue at this point. It's often associated with severe childhood trauma, especially in the form of absentee fathers and perhaps insane mothers. But accepting as true a person's claim that they are really a member of the opposite gender is the same as accepting as true an emaciated anorexic's claim that he or she is morbidly obese. They are both psychological issues. And then offering diet pills or stomach stapling to this person who believes that they are really fat when they're not. The bottom line, when a society abandons reality, when it pretends the genetic coding that dictates our body's gender is meaningless, that society is headed for a disastrous landing. Mentally ill men who think they're women do not need to go to gynecologists because they do not have a uterus. They do not have ovaries or fallopian tubes or any of the other organs associated with the female animal's prime function, a function which is to incubate babies. Girls pretending to be boys dangerously ignores their biological needs and may endanger their health. They get tangled up with a boy. Boys are a little stronger. They might hurt them. Once doctors start playing along with these anti-science, anti-reality fantasies, these doctors lose the trust of about 95% or so of Americans who inhabit a fact-based reality in which human animals with penises are boys and human animals with vaginas are girls. I don't know how you could trust your doctor if he can't tell the two apart. And why would you take medical advice from him or her if they're not capable of doing that? Townhall.com provided us with a little bit of news this week. I call it taking care of business. The federal effort, they write, named Operation Legend, was launched on July 8, 2020 by Attorney General Bill Barr. And it deployed into Chicago, Kansas City, Albuquerque, New Mexico, Cleveland, Detroit, Milwaukee, St. Louis, Memphis, and Indianapolis. Cadres of officers of the law. It was named after a 4-year-old whose name is Legend Taliaferro, a 4-year-old who died back in June after being shot while sleeping at home in a Kansas City, Missouri home. The man suspected of killing Taliaferro was arrested in August. The conclusion of these raids and these efforts by the Attorney General yielded over 6,000 arrests, including approximately 467 for homicides. More than 2,600 firearms were seized, more than 32 kilos of heroin, more than 17 kilos of fentanyl, more than 300 kilos of methamphetamine, more than 135 kilos of cocaine, more than $11 million in drug and other illicit proceeds, all seized by the DOJ. The question becomes, where were the police departments in these particular cities? The DOJ said, quote, of the more than 6,000 individuals arrested, approximately 1,500 have been charged with federal offenses. Approximately 815 of those defendants have been charged with firearms offenses, while approximately 566 have been charged with drug-related crimes. The remaining defendants have been charged with various offenses. Oh, we have a new COVID relief bill. The bill is literally 5,593 pages long. It contains some of the most absurd provisions imaginable. Not my words, the words of prophecynewswatch.com, who provided the article. Americans apparently will receive $600 in relief. You've heard this bandied about recently. Unauthorized immigrant adults excluded last time could get up to $1,800 in this bill. $40 million that will be allocated for what they call the necessary expenses for the operation, maintenance, and security of the Kennedy Center. A Kennedy Center that is currently closed. A Kennedy Center that received $25 million in the last COVID relief bill. $154 million for the National Gallery of Art, nearly $200 million, so federal HIV/AIDS workers overseas could buy cars and car insurance. The bill creates a Women's History Museum and an American Latino Museum as part of the Smithsonian. Overall, the Smithsonian gets $1 billion. The bill also lays the groundwork for a Climate Security Advisory Council. Now do you know why our president refused to sign it? Why he vetoed it? Why they had to go back to the drawing board? And just how much more money can these people waste? There's actually a commission tasked with educating consumers about the dangers associated with using or storing portable fuel containers for flammable liquids near an open flame. This is our Congress at work. Oh, and for the bizarre, as if that's not enough, look at the important statement of policy regarding the succession or reincarnation of the Dalai Lama. Yeah, that's in the bill. Not a joke. It's really there. And the bill passed. It passed the House the first time by a vote of 359 to 53. This is our Congress at work. Do you have any idea how much COVID is costing us? Adding together this year's two COVID relief packages, the amount of stimulus passed by Congress in 2020 would dwarf any previous U.S. government spending program, including the New Deal. This according to Axios.com. Before this year, America's largest ever spending program was President Obama's American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. It was just over $1 trillion in today's money. Per capita, for you public school educated children, that means per person, or as a percentage of GDP, the record was held by FDR's New Deal back in 1933, which spent about $6,680 in today's dollars for every living American. Both records could be smashed this year with stimulus, so far totaling in the neighborhood of $8,845 per American. Our government at work. That's what's been going on while you weren't paying a whole lot of attention. When we come back, we'll take a look at this new COVID relief bill. Stay with me.